Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Unleashing Potentials podcast. Today's special guest is Shereen. How are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm so happy we finally made this happen.
I know, right? We had to persevere, but we made it.
Yes. And I love that. Yes. So, can you start by telling us who you are and what you do?
Yes, of course. My name is Shereen Thor. I am an author and a keynote speaker. Also done executive coaching for about 17 years. That makes me sound like an old lady. And yeah, what brings me to you today is that ages ago, when I was a young girl, I learned from my parents that I should be who they want me to be to gain their conditional love. And so I was, a daughter of immigrants, 100% Egyptian, thought, well, I got to be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer because like that's what they want. So I ended up trying, when I went to college, I did not want to major in engineering. So I majored in communications, was like my attempt at a compromise. I would have loved to do philosophy or art or dance, but of course my mother would have been like, are you insane? You're going to be a broke artist. So I did communications, graduated, got my first job out of college, and about 3 months in, had a really weird experience. This guy walked into my office and closed the door behind him and hovered over my desk and said, if you don't lose your attitude, I'm going to bend you over this desk and spank you. And I was like a young 20 something, 3 months out of academia. And I didn't even know why or what, I was completely just stunned. So I go to lunch with my girlfriends and they're like, that is sexual harassment. And I'm like, no, I think he was just, and they're like, no, that is sexual harassment. That is not okay. And I'm like, they're definitely right. But so anyway, I tell my boss and my boss is upset and he goes and tells his boss and his boss is upset. So it was like the president and the CFO. And then the two of them went to the CEO and told them about it. So they brought me into the office and the three of them had a talk with me, and I fully expected to be supported because my direct supervisor and his direct supervisor were upset, right? However, the CEO just kind of looked me in the face and said, but he was just joking, right? You can still work with him, right?
Oh,
and I'm just like this young, green, no experience, and I'm holding back tears. And I just said, sure. So I walked out of his office that day with a touch less of dignity. And I stayed at that job for about 1.5 years after that because I was afraid to leave with really no resume and no experience, right? So every day I went into that job, I lost a little more dignity until finally there was an intervention. So my friend nagged me to go to a personal growth seminar. And I did not want to go because I was like, that's for like people who need help. Like, I'm good. I got a degree. I have a job. I have it together. I don't need that. So anyway, she nagged me long enough. I finally gave in. And I'm literally arms folded asking for my money back. And they're like, well, our return policy is that you got to go through the whole weekend. And if you go through the whole weekend, you get nothing out of it, then we can give you your money back, but you have to at least give it a shot. I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
And here we are, probably 20 years later, and I'm super grateful for that return policy because what ended up happening was I realized how much I had been deferring my own authority over my life to my parents' expectations, to just trying not to be the whistleblower at work, right? Everything I was doing is very people-pleasing, non-confrontational, just flying under the radar. I didn't major in what I wanted to in college, right? I didn't stand up for myself when I was sexually harassed. I was just really trying to skate as many immigrant kids do, So I decided to stop being a people pleaser and I became a little rebel girl and I quit a master's degree program that I was dutifully enrolled in and began to do stand-up comedy.
Oh, wow.
So that is like the beginning of me being my actual self, right? Like honoring the creative type, honoring the performer, honoring the part of me that was, I don't know, a little wild and made no sense.
Yeah.
So it was a really beautiful experience to start doing stand-up comedy, to get out there, to perform at clubs, to tour, to travel, to hold a mic and stand up for myself in this different way, right?
Yeah.
Did it for 2 years, and I started getting scouted on MTV and started getting brought into VH1 for auditions. And I thought, wow, I think this is actually going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
But while I was doing comedy, I also continued to get coached and go to seminars, and I drank the Kool-Aid, and I was like having my own kind of transformation, right? And really like plugging into a community and a culture that supported my growth and healing and transformation. And so both of those were happening at the same time. So when comedy really started to look like it was about to take off, I was like, I think I'm obsessed with coaching, because it has fully transformed my life, just having that safe space with someone where I could pull off that mask of who I'm supposed to be and be my authentic self. So I ditched comedy. I went all in on coaching, and I've been coaching for 17 years. And that's my story, Bernadette.
Wow. Wow. Not too much to unpack. I'm kidding. Wow. Tell me a joke.
Oh my gosh. I don't even have any jokes anymore. Girl, it's been a long time. I am starting to write new jokes, but I don't actually have any jokes. The truth is, what ended up happening was I wrote a book called Revolutionary Woman, maybe like 3 years ago, and became a bestseller.
Wow.
And then I had this miracle happen. One of these companies that I contract with as a coach chose me out of their like over 3,000 coaches to speak on an event alongside Serena Williams, Prince Harry, Pau Gasol, all these greats in the industry. And I was like, oh, that feels like a miracle. Like that's really wild. And then about a year later, I did a TEDx talk. So I'm not a comedian anymore. Wish I had a joke for you, but I don't. But I am a professional speaker. So that's kind of, I think, where comedy makes its way into my career now.
Wow, that's awesome. Did you always wanted to do what you're doing right now?
I mean, that's a great question. I think about this a lot because I was always very confused. Like, wait, I was a comedian and now I'm a coach, almost like this identity of like confusion around who am I and how do I do what I do. And when I was a kid, I wanted to be a professional dancer. I wanted to be a professional singer. I wanted to be a professional athlete. I clearly just wanted to like do things in front of people, so there was that energy there all the time. So I can't say I thought I want to be a professional speaker, but I had these ideas of jobs where I got to kind of perform or be in a crowd. Mm-hmm. And then in high school, I think my personality, my goobery personality started to come out more, and people would always give me feedback and say, you should really be an actress. Your facial expressions, you're so expressive, you should be an actress. And I don't even know where I came up with it. This is when I was like 15. I'd say, well, I'd rather be a comedian than an actress, because at least then I could say my own words and thoughts. Yeah. And then fast forward, I'm actually a stand-up comedian when I'm, 23 or whatever it was. And can't say I ever thought I wanted to be a professional speaker. But once I went into coaching, I was like, oh, I just want to change people's lives. And I remember I used to host a show on AfterBuzz TV in LA, and they wanted me to be like a talking head for the Vampire Diaries. And I was like, I don't want to talk about the Vampire Diaries. I don't care, I want to watch the show, but I don't want to talk about the show. And then they kind of put me in this Oprah Winfrey recap show. So I would be talking about things that Oprah was talking about on her network. And that I loved. So that was when I started to kind of put it together. Like, I do love to be on a microphone. I do love to say some things, but I don't just want to say anything. I don't just want to talk about anything. I want to feel like there's purpose. I want to feel like I'm making an impact. And so I probably should have figured it out sooner, honestly, that speaking was going to be the thing.
Yeah. Wow.
It took a while.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about your experience at one of the jobs that you were telling us about. I'm just on fire a little bit. You can't see it. That's just how passionate I am to continue talking about those issues, especially at work when it comes to sexual trauma, just sexual harassment in general. And the
Mhm.
fact that you had to go through what you went through and not much was done about it at the time, that
Yep.
is so wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
where did society go wrong? I mean, wow,
Mm.
it blows my mind. And
100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
woman to woman, I'm gonna say me too. It did
Mm.
happen at work, happened a few times as a child and
Mm.
so on. And the most recent one was actually this year. And I
Wow.
haven't really, yeah, I haven't really openly talked about it yet, but it's
Mhm.
something I want to do is to bring a few women together and do a few episodes of women sharing their own raw experience, right? The healing
Yeah.
has begun, but it
Yeah.
really does sucks for us survivors who who are trying to speak, but we're not always heard, right? And
Mm.
I'm just on a mission to advocate not only for mental health for things I've been through, but
Mhm.
specifically for that one, right? And
Yeah, and good for
yeah,
you that you are. I know you're not telling us what happened, but you are talking about it right now, and you are going to get a panel of women to get together and talk about it right now. And I think
mm,
that is actually so much a part of the healing from the trauma.
yeah,
When it happened at the time, I think I was just trying to survive. So yes, I held tears back, but I didn't sit around and cry about it. I didn't like my job, but I also didn't leave, right? So there was a lot of suppression happening. And I
mhm,
think that was because clearly that's the coping mechanism I had learned up to that point. And a lot of my transformation, going from the comedian girl to the coach who's really been transforming myself and other people for over 17 years,
mhm,
obviously part of that transformation is like I can't help someone change and heal unless I have, right? So I'm doing it within myself while I'm helping someone else do it. And I will say, I mean, I felt like it was just in the past and it was like, oh, 20 years ago, and it's just something that happened. I never talked about it. But when I did my TEDx talk earlier this year,
yeah,
that is one of the stories I tell, because I definitely tell the same story I told you, maybe with less words, maybe
yeah.
slightly more eloquent on the TEDx talk. But as I was writing it was the first time I had talked about it in like 20 years.
Mm,
As I was writing it, it was one thing, but when I would practice my talk in front of just a few people on Zoom, every time I told the story, I would cry. And
mm,
on my mind, I was like, this happened ages ago. I haven't thought about it or talked about it. Why am I crying as I recall the story? And I think, to your point, a lot of times we just have a lot of things that we have experienced that we
mhm,
have shoved away because we had to survive and move forward and cope.
yeah,
And really, I think a big catalyst for healing and transformation is women telling their stories, right? Like I now can tell the story and I do not cry. And to me, that means I've processed the trauma out of my system, right? Like it was there and it was suppressed. I didn't have space or room to go anywhere. I wasn't even looking at it. When I finally gave it the light of day, right? A little attention,
yeah,
the emotion came out, which was a purple. I was confused by that. And yet there's nothing confusing about it. I mean,
yeah,
when you are subjugated and treated poorly and no one stands up for you,
yeah,
it's abuse, mental, emotional, physical, sexual, whatever, right? So, and no one stood up for me and I didn't stand up for myself. So
mhm,
just really interesting, right? Like just so many people experience so many things similar to this.
yeah,
And I really do appreciate the topic of your podcast for this purpose of giving people space to really just begin the conversation or even look within themselves of maybe what are the areas within them, the experiences they've had that they haven't processed yet, they haven't given space to, that are taking up energy to keep blocked down, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And as you've expressed, trauma, it carries on. Like
Mm,
some people are living with burdens that are not theirs to carry for
mhm.
20 years, 30 years, 50, 60 years. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping, with each stories that they can remove some of that off their backs and
Hmm.
put it away and heal from it and grow from it and help others from it, right? Because it's a process. And I think when we're given the permission in the space or the room for us to be who we are without judgment, then we can begin to surrender to our pain and not be enslaved by the pain that we felt, right?
Yeah.
And it starts within, unfortunately. Most of us don't want to go. I didn't want to go in there. I'm still digging and I don't like what I'm touching and feeling. It's crappy and it's stinky. It hurts and it's traumatic, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's where it begins.
That is where it
Us
begins.
face our demons and the very things that terrifies us, even when we're smiling or crying. We have to face it.
Yeah.
I'm still facing mine.
Hats off to you. I know it's not easy.
Yeah. What would you say to women that have experienced what you did?
Revolt against the toxicity that is the patriarchy. I mean, the truth is, I don't know, because everything, there's so much context, right? Like in my, if someone came to me and experienced what I experienced, I would say, you need to leave that job, or you need to seek counsel from an attorney, right? At this age and stage of my life, I look at it so differently. So many people have been like, you could have sued them. I'm like, I didn't know that. I mean, I was just literally a kid out of college. I didn't know anything about employment laws or what's right, what's wrong. I just knew that the top boss thought it was fine, you know? And in a lot of ways, things are different now, right? Hashtag Me Too wasn't a thing back then, you know? And now it's like, we can speak about these things. We are beginning to be heard, and we still need to pound the pavement to be heard, respected, and acknowledged. So it still isn't easy. It's definitely easier than it was back then, though. You know, back then it was just full on. No one had removed the veil, right? Like we all were operating under the lens of the patriarchy or white privilege, right? We were all just operating under these guises that society had sort of agreed upon, and it was just unconscious, and we were all just floating through. And then all of them started to get ripped off. My goodness. So things are definitely different now. Yeah.
My gosh, we've come a long way.
Yes.
Women. And we're still fighting.
True.
How ridiculous is that?
I know.
I'm sorry. I'm human. Yes. I really, really do not understand how some people think, the concept of their actions and thoughts, and how they think some of the shit they do is okay. I don't get it. Right. And sometimes it's good to give, some people are silenced, but sometimes being silent isn't enough, because it kills us. It eats us alive, and we wish we had done what we couldn't done. Right. And just speak up. Speak up, because no matter what we do, whether we speak or we stay quiet, we'll always be wrong. That was my case. I was quiet. I stayed in my lane. I mind my business. I was still getting manipulated, lied to, abused, and like, okay, you're waking up the bear. Good luck. Right. It's to find our voice. And I think you're helping people do that through your coaching. Speaking of coaching, tell me your methods and process. How do you help people, and who do you help?
Good question. I mean, I help all the people, both men and women. I often work with more women than men. My book is called Revolutionary Woman, and it's really sort of taking, you know, you heard my story, right? Is me sort of rebelling against my own limiting beliefs, boxes I had operated within that were from my family of origin, that were clearly keeping me stuck, unhappy, truly depressed. I was actually quite depressed when I was at that job and not making any change in my life. I sort of didn't know what to do different. So I think in a lot of ways, my life, you know, me having done comedy, writing the book, working for myself, doing a TEDx talk, answering my own higher calling, is my call to other humans to say, hey, look, you could. I'm not incredibly extraordinary. I'm not better than anybody. I just was maybe crazy enough, you know?
I love
a little
crazy.
It's like twofold. One, a little wild, right?
Mhm.
Two, super unhappy. You put those two things together, right? Like if you're really unhappy in your life and you have a tolerance for risk, those are a lovely combination. The other side is I went to the seminar. So I had a community of humans who were all setting goals, who I remember going to the back of the table at that seminar and saying, gosh, I don't think I could get the time off of work to go to this next seminar that's like 7 whole days. Like, I don't know if I, and they said, well, then you're working at the wrong place. She didn't even know what had happened to me. I was like, girl, you didn't even know. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Working at the wrong place. You know what I mean? So like, it
Yeah.
was like, it was like they invited me into a new culture, a new perspective where you got to take 7 days off work and you didn't need to tolerate sexual harassment and you got to go after goals. Just that energy of, I don't know, audacity, risk taking, chasing happiness, joy, dreaming was
Mhm.
something I had never heard anybody do. I mean, immigrants, they come to America and they survive. They survive at all costs and they do well,
Yeah.
but they survive. You know, they do it safe. You go to school, you get your education and you get a stable job and you be quiet.
Yeah.
Like, don't go starting businesses, don't go being all sassy, trying to be a
Yeah.
speaker, a comedian. Like, no, that's not
Yeah.
what we do, you know?
Mhm.
So I guess what I'm saying to you is I don't have any specific method. I definitely live by example.
Yeah. Yeah.
The book is 9 chapters of a call to action, right? All the way through. And every client I have, they're not cookie cutter. Everybody's different. Everyone's a different Rubik's Cube that I'm figuring out.
Mhm.
And goal setting is always a big part of it. I start there because if you don't have anything you're going for, then like, I don't know how to coach you. So got to dream a little.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then just play. Then we just be in
Mhm.
the art of change, the art of transformation, the art of how the accountability and just taking one step. Because to me, you know, a lot of coaches will say to sell you something, they'll say, quit your job and start your business. They'll say, put $15,000 on a credit card, right? Like there's that there's this intensity in the coaching industry.
Yeah.
You know, with great risk comes great reward. You only get what you put into it. So there's a lot of like pressure, right? They can sell you stuff. I'm not that girl. Incremental is sustainable. Like I'm not trying to help you disrupt your life and like ruin your stability at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Because I also know from experience that when I did leave a stable job and start a business, I actually started to develop health issues because when you're chasing money and money isn't coming, it's depressing and it's very hard on your mental and emotional well-being. So to me, I'm like, yeah, I want you to chase your dream, but I want you to do it with dignity, right? I want you to honor the mind, heart, soul, body and respect the order of the universe. And the order of the universe is that you need your basic needs met before you can grab a star. That's just facts.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to like sell people into like anything crazy. I mean, even when I did comedy, I still kept my job. I did then go into entrepreneurship and craziness. And then I was like, oh, that's too much. I'm gonna reel it in. So what you see before you is now a very stable business, a best-selling author, a keynote speaker, a TEDx talk, but it was 17 years in the making. I didn't go fast, you know, it was like a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. So that's how I coach. I'm like, just what I want is for people to hold the space of a dream while taking incredible care of themselves. That's what I want. Because to me, that's the right way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I get a sense you take your clients back to live in the now, because so many of us want to live in the future or the past, or we live in both, and there's a gap in between. It's like, that's why so many people don't know what their purpose is, and should they go back to what their parents told them to be, or what they learned at school, the degrees they got, and they don't really live in the now. They're chasing something that's in tomorrow that hasn't even been birthed yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that is
They get
100%.
tired and worn out because they're not
Exactly.
in the now. And the
Yeah.
people who are in the now, they're the crazy ones, the wild ones. And like, it's like, people say, why are you so happy?
Yeah.
It's him, right? We have to
Yeah.
find that seeds that's being planted and the seed that hasn't been buried quite yet. Because once that's buried, you got to go back inward again and
That's
find something. Yeah. Speaking of, you ready for that question? Would you say your family and parents accept what you're doing right now?
I mean, I think when you do a TEDx talk, like,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it took my mom a long time. I mean, she was like ashamed of me when I was a comedian. She didn't want to tell any, I mean, because they're very religious, right? So like, it was like, oh my gosh, this like dirty, environment. Like she's this like, I think the thing with a lot of immigrant families, at least mine, is prestige. When you're a doctor, it's very prestigious. And so I think comedy was like the opposite of that. It was like, I was just out here in these streets slanging jokes, It was just like being a naughty girl with the mic, I was like the opposite of what she valued.
Yeah.
But at that point, I had thrown caring about what she thought to the wayside, right? That was what I was doing. I was awakening my inner rebel. That's chapter 1 of my book, Awaken the Rebel. You cannot live your purpose if you are people pleasing. You cannot hear the voice of your own soul if you are listening to other people's voices, right? So there's just this energy of like, I had to just be like, no, mama don't like it. What's new?
Yeah.
Eventually, very long down the road, I think she started to see, like, oh, okay, this is real. She's coaching real clients at real companies. She wrote a book, best-selling author. You throw Prince Harry into the mix and all of a sudden I look like I'm somebody. Yeah. And then the TEDx talk was like, that's it. That's all I need for the rest of my life. I could just fart around.
Yeah. So you've met Prince Harry?
No, I did not. I actually just had somebody ask me that the other day, like, did you meet him? And I'm like, I did not meet him. I was a speaker on an event and he was a speaker on the same event. So we spoke separately.
Yeah.
Now I shared the stage with Prince Harry. So
that's so cool. That's awesome. Wow. What's next in your journey? What are some projects are you working on?
What am I doing with my life? I mean, I do feel like my life is a perpetual midlife crisis.
Oh, you're not alone. You're not alone.
Yeah. So honestly, right now I'm focusing on keynote speaking. I just got chosen to speak at a conference in the UK. So I'm super excited to be an international speaker.
Yeah.
And then got chosen as a keynote speaker for an HR conference on the East Coast. So it's like really exciting to feel like, the part of me that wants to speak to groups and inspire someone in real life, right? Like in real life, there's an energy with that. When I was doing my TEDx talk, I had gotten accepted prior to the one I said yes to and did. I had gotten accepted to virtual TEDx talks. Like they said, oh, we want you to do it, but or actually one of them was, you're going to come to us and you're going to be on a stage, but there will be no audience because this is like a medical school. We're still being really careful after COVID. And I was like, no audience. I have a comedy background. I can't do without an audience. And another one said yes. And they're like, you would record it at your office or home and send it to us. I'm like, by myself? Like, I'm not trying to do some profound TEDx talk by myself. So then finally I got one that said, yes, come audience. I was like, yes, there's like 100 people in the crowd. Boom, let's go. So that was like, it reminded me that there is an experience I'm looking for. I want to be in a room with humans, I want to like feel an energy. I want to feel alive. I want to travel. I want all of that. So anyway, all that to say, I'm super excited about the speaking. It is lighting up my life. I have spent I'm a mom of 2 kids, 9 and 6.5. So I've basically spent, let's say, the last 8 years of my life being very much focusing on them, building my business and focusing on them. And so it kind of feels like perfect timing that they're big kids now, and I get to fly off to the UK and
that's awesome. Wow. I'm the opposite of you. I would have loved to speak to a no crowd. I am not a crowd person. I run the other direction when I see crowds. Do you ever get nervous? When you have to talk and what you talk about, what is your train of thoughts?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, I will say the scariest thing I've ever done in my life is comedy, for sure. I mean, it was so disturbingly scary. I would I'll nearly ran out the door to not do. I mean, truly, I was terrified. So there's that. 17 years later, when I did my TEDx talk just earlier this year, I mean, I was super nervous. I was super nervous, but I think in a way it was like, I don't know, maybe like
You have
there's
more
this feeling,
experience now.
yeah, there's this feeling I have now as like an over 40-year-old grown up mother, wife, homeowner, professional. I've put so much time in. Like I have grinded so hard as an entrepreneur in this game that there was this, I was nervous because it was TEDx, but there was this feeling of like, I'm meant to be here in this moment. And that feels good, you know? So even though this is scary, I still feel grounded. Even though this is TEDx, I still feel grateful. You know, it was like this dichotomy of like fear and jittery, sort of anxious energy, and like just like gratitude and groundedness, and sort of like that feeling of I know who I am, right? Like I've followed my purpose. I know who I am. I know what I'm meant for. And this is part of what I'm meant for. So it was like a combo with the TEDx talk.
That's awesome. Do you have any regrets?
Oh man, that's a good question. I mean, I do regret never doing roller derby when I was a younger girl. Or like never doing like football. You know how there's like women who have played football. I just recall these moments where I was in high school and I saw that football looked like a really fun sport and that women just couldn't play it. And I remember thinking like, oh, that really sucks. I would want to do that.
Yeah.
So I think to some degree, there is a part of me that's like, oh, I wish I would have done it. Like, I wish there were things that I would have done some things that I maybe back then just wasn't this version of myself. I think this version of myself would, because she has released herself of societal norms. You know what I mean? Whereas back then it was like, you kind of need to play the rules. You know, you need to like, you need to play by the rules. You need to be a good girl, you know? So terribly huge, but yeah, there are certain things that I'm like, okay, I'm 41. I'm not going to get on roller skates and pull my Achilles heel. That ship has sailed. We're letting it go. Though I did decide recently that I will, one, get back on stage and have some fun doing comedy just for fun.
Oh, nice.
Two, maybe learn karate. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Every time I do a peace sign, do you see these balloons? It's so weird.
What happened?
It's like Zoom. It's like Zoom AI. Like I need to turn it off because I'm just like, oh, I guess it's a party because.
I mean, we have been partying. That's so. I want to check that out now. That's so cool. Wow. I have two questions for you as we wrap up. First one, what is the meaning of life for you?
Really hit me with a good one there. The meaning of life for me is connection, healing, and transformation.
Oh, you got a thumbs up. Did you see that?
Those are the two things that keep happening. Do you put this podcast out on video?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, good. So at least they know what we're talking about, so we won't sound crazy on audio.
Yeah.
Whatever. Connection, healing, and transformation, love, purpose. Yeah, just like answering your soul's higher calling. I think that's really what I believe.
Oh, wow. I like that. Yeah. Where can my listeners find you and support your work and buy your book? Where's your book at?
The book is on Amazon. You can also find it on my website at ShereenThor.com. It's basically like the name Sheree, but with an N on the end. Yeah.
Thor. There's a movie called Thor, right?
That's right. God of thunder and lightning.
Oh. Whoa. I'm like, is she descendant of Thor?
You know, that's right.
Awesome.
Watch out, girlfriend.
Do you have any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I think for anyone listening who was inspired, surprised, delighted by this story, I would just ask, like, what's in it for you? Like, there are people I coach who have incredibly impressive corporate jobs, and I just think they're set. Like, they wouldn't want anymore. They are so successful. And then out of nowhere, they'll direct message me on LinkedIn and they'll say, hey, I really love that you're a speaker. Like, how did you get into that? I kind of might want to do something else in my career. And I'm always shocked. I'm always like, what? Like, you just have such a good job. Like, so many people wish they could be in your shoes. I'm shocked. But I feel like that's the answering your higher calling. That's like you being your authentic self. using your unique gifts and talents, right? You said you don't love an audience. I don't know why I love an audience, but why wouldn't I go be in front of an audience if that's something I love, you know? So just, I guess what I'm really saying to your people is you are uniquely wired in a certain way to do the thing that you are uniquely meant to do. So like, let's go, you know, do it. Nobody can do it like you can do it. So I'd love to just see it happen.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Shereen, thank you so much for your time on the podcast, for sharing your journey and story with us. Keep shining. Just get it done. Just do it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.